Chapter 1. Glass and blued. The champagne flute shattered against marble 3 inches from my face. I didn't flinch. Not because I was brave. I'd learned years ago that showing fear only made cruel men crueler. The crystal exploded into a constellation of glittering shards, and I watched them settle like snow across the polished floor of the Bellacourt Hotel's private dining room. Incompetent. The word came low and cold from the man at the head of the table. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The 12 men in expensive suits around him had gone silent the moment his fingers released the glass. I kept my eyes down, the empty tray trembling slightly in my hands. My black uniform was soaked with crystal down the front. $2,000 a bottle. My manager would remind me later, probably while firing me. This was my 3rd catering job into months. I couldn't afford to lose another. Look at me. My pulse kicked hard against my throat. I'd been trained better than this. Keep your head down. Stay invisible. Don't engage. But something in his voice made refusal impossible. Some gravitational pull I couldn't name. I looked up. He was younger than I expected. Mid-30s maybe, with the kind of face that belonged in Renaissance paintings, all sharp angles and cold beauty. Dark hair swept back from a widow's peak. Eyes like black ice in the candlelight. He wore his power the way other men wore cologne, subtle and suffocating. You spilled on my associate, he said. Each word was measured, deliberate. Ruined a $10,000 suit. It was an accident. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Someone bumped my elbow. I don't care about accidents. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with the detached interest of someone examining an insect. I care about results, competence, things you clearly lack. Heat rushed to my face. Around the table, his men watched with the dead-eyed patience of predators waiting for a kill. I recognized the look. I'd grown up around men like these, though they'd worn cheaper suits and carried different titles. Apologize, he said softly. I opened my mouth, closed it. Something stubborn and stupid rose in my chest, the same reckless impulse that had made me run away at 17. That had kept me alive on streets where girls like me disappeared. No, the silence that followed felt like the moment before a bomb detonates. One of his men half rose from his chair. You want me to? The boss raised one finger. The man sat back down immediately. No? The word was silk over steel. He stood slowly, and I realized how tall he was, how the candlelight caught in the hollows of his cheekbones and made shadows of his eyes. Do you know who I am? Should I? Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or amusement. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. He moved around the table with the fluid grace of a stalking cat. I forced myself to hold my ground, even as my instincts screamed to run. He stopped close enough that I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. What's your name? He asked. Elena. Elena what? I hesitated. My surname felt dangerous in my mouth, weighted with history I'd spent 5 years trying to forget. Moretti. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I watched the realization move through him like poison, the slight widening of his eyes, the almost imperceptible tension in his jaw. Around the table, his men exchanged glances sharp as knives. Moretti, he repeated slowly. His gaze swept over me again, but different now, calculating. Franco Moretti's daughter? My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard my father's name spoken aloud in 3 years, not since I'd changed cities and identities and buried every connection to the family business. Franco Moretti, crime boss of the Eastern Territories. Ruthless enough to make other monsters nervous. Cruel enough that his own daughter had fled rather than become another piece in his empire. I don't know what you're. Don't lie to me. His voice went soft and deadly. You have his eyes, his mouth, and clearly his talent for making spectacularly poor decisions. He reached out, and I flinched before I could stop myself. But he only plucked a piece of glass from my hair, holding it up to the light. A drop of blood welled on his thumb where the crystal had cut him. Does Franco know his little girl is working as a waitress? He asked. Spilling champagne on my associates in a hotel he doesn't control, in a city where his name means nothing. My father and I don't speak. Smart. He let the glass fall, studying his bleeding thumb with mild interest. If he knew you were here, in my territory, serving drinks to my men. He looked up at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. He'd start a war. Then don't tell him. Oh, tesoro. He smiled, and it was the most dangerous thing I'd ever seen. It's far too late for that. The door burst open. 2 men in dark suits entered fast, guns drawn, and I realized with sick certainty that this wasn't about the spilled champagne anymore. This was about bloodlines and territories and a game. I'd thought I'd escaped. The boss caught my wrist before I could move. His grip iron gentle. You and I, he said quietly, are going to have a very long conversation about your father. Chapter 2. The devil's bargain. The gun wasn't pointed at me. That realization came slowly, filtering through the panic that had turned my thoughts to static. The two armed men flanked the doorway, weapons trained on the hallway beyond, scanning for threats that hadn't materialized yet. Clear the room, the boss said, still holding my wrist. His men moved with practiced efficiency, rising from the table in a coordinated exodus. No questions, no hesitation. Within 30 seconds, the private dining room was empty except for the two of us and the guards at the door. He released me and walked to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain to study the street below. I should have run. Every survival instinct I'd honed over 5 years screamed at me to bolt for the service exit, disappear into the kitchen chaos, vanish the way I'd learned to vanish, but something kept me frozen. Maybe it was the way he'd said my father's name like tasting poison. Maybe it was the blood still beating on his thumb from the champagne glass. Sit down, Elena. I'd rather stand. He glanced back at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than cold calculation in his expression. Exhaustion? Maybe. Or the particular weariness that came from carrying too much weight for too long. Your legs are shaking, he observed. You're in shock. Sit before you fall. I hated that. He was right. My knees had gone liquid, my hands still trembling around the empty tray. I set it down on the table with a clatter and lowered myself into the nearest chair. He moved to the bar cart in the corner, poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. No ice. He brought it to me, setting it on the table within reach. I don't drink on shift. You're not on shift anymore. He leaned against the table, arms crossed. I bought out your contract for the evening. You work for me now. The whiskey burned going down, but it steadied something inside me. I set the glass down carefully. You can't just buy people. I can buy almost anything. He said it matter-of-factly, without arrogance. Your employer was very accommodating once I explained the situation. What situation? The one where Franco Moretti's daughter is serving drinks in my city without protection, without an escort, without anyone knowing she's here. He studied me with those dark, unreadable eyes. Do you understand how many people would pay to know that information? How many of your father's enemies would love to get their hands on you? My stomach twisted. I'd been so careful. New name on my work papers. Cash jobs only. Never staying anywhere longer than a few months. 5 years of looking over my shoulder, and I'd walk straight into a room full of the exact kind of men I'd been hiding from. I'm nobody, I said. I left that world. I'm not leverage. You're Franco Moretti's only child. He pushed off from the table, pacing to the window again. The daughter he's been quietly searching for since you disappeared. The air he refuses to acknowledge is gone. Ice flooded my veins. He's looking for me? Every city, every month. Discreetly. He hasn't made it public, probably doesn't want to appear weak. He turned back to me. But word travels in our circles. Missing daughter. Substantial reward for information leading to her safe return. The room tilted. I'd convinced myself my father had written me off, that I was just another casualty of his brutal empire. The idea that he'd been searching, that there was a price on my location, made breathing difficult. Who are you? I asked. You know my father. You have this much power, but I don't recognize you. Dante Crusoe. The name hit me like a fist. Even in hiding, even trying to stay ignorant of the underworld's politics, I'd heard whispers of Dante Crusoe, the young boss who'd taken over the Western territories. 3 years ago, after a bloodbath that left 6 families. Decimated, ruthless, strategic. They said he'd rebuilt his father's empire in half the time with twice the brutality. They also said he and Franco Moretti had been on the brink of war for 2 years. You're going to trade me, I said flatly. Use me as a bargaining chip with my father. He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the candlelight. That would be the smart play. But Franco Moretti is a rabid dog who mistakes cruelty for strength. Danny's voice hardened. I've seen what he does to the people in his orbit, especially women, especially his daughter. My throat tightened. He knew. Somehow, he knew why I'd run. If I send you back to him, Dante continued, he'll lock you in a gilded cage and marry you off to whichever ally offers him the best strategic advantage. You'll disappear into someone else's empire, used as currency. His jaw tightened. I don't traffic in unwilling women. How noble. Bitterness leaked into my voice. So what do you want? Why tell your men to secure the door? Why buy out my contract? He moved closer, and I fought the urge to lean back. This close, I could see the faint scar along his jawline. The way exhaustion shadowed the skin beneath his eyes, because the moment you told me your name, you became a liability I can't ignore. His voice dropped. Every person in that room heard it. And while my men are loyal, information like this has a way of slipping through cracks. By morning, someone will tell someone who will tell someone. And eventually, your father will know you're in my city. So I'm a problem you need to solve. You're a problem we both need to solve. He held my gaze. I'm offering you protection. A safe house, security. Time to figure out your next move. In exchange for what? His smile was sharp as broken glass. In exchange for helping me destroy your father's empire from the inside. Chapter 3. The contract written in smoke. He laughed. I couldn't help it, a short, bitter sound that echoed off the marble walls. You want me to betray my father. I want you to survive. Dande pulled out the chair across from me and sat. Movements deliberate and controlled. There's a difference. Not to him there isn't. I wrapped my hands around the whiskey glass, needing something solid to anchor me. Franco Moretti doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. If I help you, and he finds out, he'll kill you. Dande said it simply, without inflection. But he'll kill you anyway, Elena. Maybe not with a bullet, but with a marriage contract to some monster who'll break you slowly. With a life spent as decoration in someone else's war. With the slow death of becoming everything you ran away from. The truth of it settled in my chest like a stone. I'd known it, somewhere deep down. Known that staying invisible forever was impossible, that eventually my father's reach would find me. Why do you hate him so much? I asked. Something flickered across Dandy's face, pain, quickly suppressed. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a silver cigarette case, flipping it open. Do you mind? I shook my head. He lit one with a matching silver lighter, and the smell of smoke filled the space between us. For a moment, he just sat there, cigarette balanced between two fingers, staring at something I couldn't see. 3 years ago, your father and mine were negotiating a treaty, he said finally. Territory disputes, shipping routes, the usual. My father brought my sister to the meeting as a show of good faith. She was newly engaged. About to marry into a family that would solidify our alliance. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Your father decided he wanted her instead. Offered my father triple the bride price. Made it clear that refusing would mean war. Dante took a drag, exhaled slowly. My father was old, tired. He agreed. My stomach dropped. I knew this story. Not the details, but the shape of it. I'd heard the rumors before I ran. Whispers about a Crusoe girl, about my father's obsession with claiming what belonged to other men. She killed herself the night before the wedding, Dante said softly. Left a note saying she'd rather die than belong to Franco Moretti. The cigarette smoke curled between us like a ghost. I'm sorry, I whispered, and meant it. My father died 6 months later. Heart attack officially. But I think it was shame. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the rage beneath the control. The grief. He'd frozen into something harder. So when I ask you to help me destroy him, understand that it's not strategy. It's not business. It's personal. I should have felt used. Should have recognized this for what it was, a man leveraging my desperation for his own revenge. But instead, I felt something else. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that came from shared wounds. What happened to her fiancé? I asked. The man she was supposed to marry? He joined my organization. Dandy's smile was humorless. He's one of the men who secured this room tonight. He's been waiting 3 years for the chance to make your father pay. I thought about the gun that hadn't been pointed at me, the cold efficiency of those guards. How many people in Danny's orbit were there because of what my father had done? How many ghosts did Franco Moretti drag behind him? Even if I wanted to help you, I said carefully, I don't have information. I left 5 years ago. I don't know his operations, his contacts, his weaknesses, but you know him. Dante leaned forward, intense. You know how he thinks, how he reacts when threatened, what he values, what he fears. He paused. And you're the only leverage that could bring him out into the open. You want to use me as bait. I want to give you a choice. He stubbed out the cigarette in a crystal ashtray. Door number 1. I put you on a plane tonight. give you new identity papers, enough money to disappear somewhere your father won't find you. South America, maybe, Asia. You run, and you keep running. And door number 2, you stay. You let me protect you while we figure out how to end this. His voice dropped. You help me make sure Franco Moretti can never hurt anyone else the way he hurt you. The way he hurt Isabella. Isabella. The sister he'd lost. The name made her real, made the grief in his eyes sharper. I looked down at my hands, still sticky with champagne and shame, at the uniform that marked me as invisible as nothing. I thought about 5 years of running, of low-wage jobs and cheap apartments, and the constant fear that someone would recognize my face. Of the girl I'd been before I left, young, naive, still believing my father might choose me over his empire. He never had. He never would. If I do this, I said slowly, I need guarantees. Name them. I want it in writing. A contract. Your protection, your resources. And when it's over, when my father can't touch me anymore, I want my freedom. No strings, no obligations. Dante pulled a pen from his jacket pocket, grabbed a napkin from the table. He wrote quickly, then slid it across to me. I, Dante Caruso, agree to protect Elena Moretti with all resources at my disposal. In exchange for her assistance in matters concerning Franco Moretti, I will ensure her complete freedom and safety upon conclusion of said matters. No obligations beyond this agreement will bind her. He signed it, then held out the pen. It's not legally binding, I said. In our world, it's worth more than any legal document. His eyes held mine. My word is the only currency that matters. I took the pen. My hand shook slightly as I signed my name next to his. When I looked up, Dante was watching me with something I couldn't quite read. Respect. Maybe, or the beginning of it. Welcome to the war. Elena, he said quietly. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. And I wondered if I'd just signed my death warrant or my salvation. Chapter 4. Safe houses and secrets. Safe house wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined something industrial, concrete walls, barred windows, the kind of place that screamed prison, even if they called it protection. Instead, Danny's SUV pulled up to a narrow townhouse in the old district, brick facades softened by climbing ivy, warm light glowing behind curtained windows. This is it? I asked. Disappointed? He killed the engine, studying the quiet street with practiced vigilance. Were you expecting a fortress? Something like that. The best hiding places don't look like hiding places. He opened his door. Besides, your father's men will be searching warehouses and secured facilities. They won't think to look in a residential neighborhood. I followed him up the steps, every nerve ending on high alert. The street was empty, but I felt exposed under the streetlights, vulnerable. How long before my father's network picked up the trail? Hours? Days? Dante unlocked 3 separate deadbolts before pushing the door open. He went in first, hand hovering near his jacket, where I knew he kept a gun. After a moment, he gestured me inside. The interior was surprisingly warm, hardwood floors, exposed brick, furniture that looked lived in rather than staged. A kitchen visible through an archway, stairs leading up to what I assumed were bedrooms. Second floor, last door on the left, Dante said, locking the door behind us. Bathrooms attached. There are clothes in the closet that should fit. You keep women's clothes in your safe house? I keep options. He moved past me toward the kitchen. I'll make coffee. You should clean up, you still smell like champagne. I wanted to argue, to assert some kind of control over a situation that had spiraled completely beyond my grasp. But he was right. The uniform clung to my skin, sticky and uncomfortable, a reminder of how thoroughly my life had shattered in the span of 2 hours. Upstairs, the bedroom was simple but comfortable. A queen bed with white linens, a wooden dresser, a window overlooking the back garden. I checked the closet and found exactly what he'd promised: jeans, sweaters, basic clothes in approximately my size. Nothing expensive, nothing memorable. Clothes for disappearing. The shower scalded away the champagne and fear, at least temporarily. I stood under the spray until my skin turned pink, trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent. I'd made a deal with a man who wanted to destroy my father. I'd signed a contract on a napkin that might be worthless, or might be the only thing keeping me alive. I'd committed treason against my own blood. When I came back downstairs, in borrowed jeans and a soft gray sweater, Dante was at the kitchen table with his laptop open, coffee steaming into mugs beside him. He'd removed his jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves. And I was struck by how different he looked, less like a crime boss, more like a man carrying the weight of impossible decisions. Sit, he said, without looking up. We need to establish protocols. I took the coffee, grateful for something to do with my hands. Protocols? Rules that keep you alive. He turned the laptop toward me. The screen showed a map of the city, various locations marked with red pins. These are your father's known holdings in the area. Restaurants, clubs, legitimate businesses he uses for money laundering. You avoid them completely. I wasn't planning on going out for dinner. You also avoid public transportation, busy streets during rush hour, anywhere with security cameras. He zoomed in on the map. If you need to leave this house, which should be rare, you take this route. His finger traced a path through side streets and residential areas. There's a panic button by your bed. Press it and I'm here in under 5 minutes. You live nearby? I live everywhere. He closed the laptop, finally meeting my eyes. I have apartments across the city. I don't stay in one place long enough to establish patterns. Sounds lonely. Something flickered in his expression. Acknowledgement, maybe, or the kind of tired acceptance that came from years of isolation. It's survival. You'll understand soon enough. I sipped the coffee. It was perfect, strong, slightly bitter, exactly what I needed. So what happens now? We just wait for my father to make a move? Now we gather information. Dante leaned back in his chair. You said you've been gone 5 years. A lot changes in 5 years. Alliances shift. Territories expand. Old enemies become new friends. I need you to tell me everything you remember about your father's operation. His trusted men, his routines, his weaknesses. I was 20 when I left. He didn't exactly include me in strategy meetings, but you lived in his house. You saw things? Dandy's voice was patient but firm. The smallest details matter. Who he trusted, who he feared, what made him angry. I closed my eyes, reaching back into memories I'd tried to bury. The compound where I'd grown up, high walls, armed guards, the constant tension that vibrated through every room. My father at the dinner table, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian to men whose names I wasn't supposed to know. He had a right hand, I said slowly. Marco Salvi. They'd known each other since childhood. My father trusted him more than his own brothers. Had? Dandy's attention sharpened. Past tense? Marco's son was killed 3 years ago. Some kind of territory dispute. I opened my eyes. My father sent flowers to the funeral, but Marco never came back to work. Last I heard, he'd retired to Sicily. Dante pulled the laptop back, typing rapidly. Marco Salvi, if he and your father had a falling out, that's a very big if, but worth investigating. He looked at me over the screen. What else? And so it began, the excavation of my past, the careful reconstruction of a world I'd tried to forget. I talked about the faces I remembered, the overheard conversations, the way my father's mood would shift when certain names were mentioned. Dante listened with the focus of someone building a weapon from scattered parts. Hours passed. The coffee went cold. Outside, the city moved through its nighttime rhythms while we sat in that kitchen, bound by blood and vengeance, and something neither of us had named yet. When I finally stumbled to bed near dawn, exhausted beyond measure, I found a folded note on my pillow. Sleep. I'm watching. It should have felt threatening. Instead, for the first time in 5 years, I felt almost safe. Chapter 5. Proximity and promise. Cece woke to the smell of something burning. For a disoriented moment, I thought I was back in one of my cramped studio apartments, late for another shift, another nameless job in another forgettable city. Then I remembered the champagne glass, Dandy's dark eyes, the contract signed in desperation, the safe house, my father's war, the choice that couldn't be undone. I found Dante in the kitchen, glaring at a smoking pan like it had personally offended him. He wore the same clothes from last night, shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Did you sleep at all? I asked. He looked up, startled. For a moment, his guard dropped and I saw something raw beneath the control. Exhaustion, maybe, or the kind of weariness that came from carrying too many ghosts. I was working. He turned off the stove, abandoning whatever charred remains occupied the pan. There's bread, cheese, coffee's fresh. I moved past him to investigate the refrigerator, acutely aware of how small the kitchen was, how his presence filled the space. He smelled like cigarette smoke and that dark cologne, cedar and something I couldn't name. You should sleep, I said, pulling out bread and butter. You can't function on nothing. I've functioned on less, but he sat heavily at the table, scrubbing his hands over his face. I've been digging into Marco Salvi. You were right, he left your father's organization abruptly 3 years ago. But it wasn't just grief over his son. I turned, bread forgotten. What was it? His son was killed by your father's order. Dandy's voice went flat, factual. Territory dispute with a rival family. Marco's boy was negotiating a peaceful resolution, going against Franco's direct command to escalate. Your father had him executed as an example. The butter knife clattered against the counter. I'd known my father was cruel, had witnessed his casual brutality my entire childhood. But this ordering the death of his best friend's son reached a new depth of monstrous. Does Marco know? I whispered. He suspects. But he's never had proof. Dante leaned forward. If we could give him that proof, if we could show him evidence of your father's betrayal, he'd turn on him. I finished the thought, mind racing. Marco knows everything: financial records, political connections, where the bodies are buried. Literally, exactly. Something sparked in Danny's eyes, energy cutting through the exhaustion. But Marco's in Sicily, protected by his own network. We'd need leverage to get him to talk, to convince him to trust us. Me. The realization settled cold in my stomach. You'd need me. Franco Moretti's daughter shows up with proof that her own father murdered his best friend's son. It might be enough. Dante stood, moving toward me with that predatory grace. But it means exposing you, putting you directly in your father's line of sight. The moment Marco knows you're alive, Franco will know. We stood too close in the narrow kitchen, separated by barely 2 feet and an ocean of dangerous possibilities. This close, I could see the faint scar along his jawline, the way his pulse beat at his throat. When would we do this? I asked. Soon. Days, maybe. I need to confirm Marco's location, establish secure contact. His gaze held mine. Are you sure, Elena? Once we do this, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment I told you my name. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You're braver than I expected. I'm terrified. The admission came out before I could stop it. I've spent 5 years running, and now I'm about to walk straight into the fire. You won't be alone. His hand lifted, hovering near my face, and for a suspended moment I thought he might touch me. Instead, he pulled back, fingers curling into a fist. I meant what I wrote. I'll protect you. Why? The question escaped before I could think better of it. You barely know me. I'm just a tool for revenge. You're Franco Moretti's daughter. His voice went soft, dangerous. You could have become him, learned his cruelty, embraced his empire. Instead, you ran. You chose poverty and fear over power built on suffering. He paused. That takes a kind of strength most people don't have. The words landed somewhere deep, in a place I'd kept locked away. No one had seen that choice as strength. Everyone else had called it weakness, cowardice, stupidity. Dante's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He stepped back, pulling it from his pocket. Whatever he saw on the screen made his jaw tighten. What is it? I asked. One of my watchers just sent a photo from the Bellecourt. He turned the phone toward me. Your father's men were there this morning, questioning the hotel staff. The image showed 2 men in dark suits, faces I recognized from my childhood. My father's enforcers. The ones who did his dirtiest work. They're searching for you, Dante said, faster than I expected. Someone must have talked. Fear flooded through me, cold and sharp. How long do we have? 48 hours. Maybe less. He was already moving, pulling his jacket from the back of a chair. I need to accelerate the timeline. Contact Marco tonight. Arrange a meeting. Where are you going? To make sure my people understand what happens if they talk. His expression went dark, remorseless. And to pay a visit to whoever sold information about last night. I caught his arm without thinking. Don't kill them. He looked down at my hand on his sleeve, then back at my face. Why not? Because I need to believe you're different from him. My voice shook slightly. That this is about justice, not just becoming another monster. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, carefully, he covered my hand with his. I'll try, he said quietly. For you. I'll try. He left, and I stood in that kitchen, smelling of burnt food and cigarette smoke. My hand still warm from where he'd touched it, wondering what I'd just felt and why it terrified me more than my father's approaching shadow. Chapter 6. The weight of wanting Dante returned just after midnight. Blood on his knuckles. I'd spent the day pacing the safe house like a caged animal. jumping at every sound, watching the street through gaps in the curtains. The waiting had carved hollows in my chest, filled them with scenarios worse than death. My father's men breaking down the door, Dante not coming back, being alone again, with nowhere left to run, when I heard his key in the lock. Relief hit so hard I had to grip the back of the couch to stay upright. He came through the door carrying takeout bags, jaw set, movements controlled, despite whatever violence still hummed beneath his skin. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, and that blood dark and damning painted his right hand. "You're hurt," I said. "It's not mine." He set the bags on the kitchen counter, running water in the sink without looking at me. "There's Thai food. You should eat." I moved closer, drawn by something I couldn't name. "Did you kill them?" "No," he scrubbed at his knuckles, the water running pink. "But they'll think twice before selling information again." "Who was it?" "A waiter. 23 years old, gambling debts." Danny's voice was empty, mechanical. "Your father's men approached him this afternoon, offered him 10,000 to identify who you left with last night." My stomach dropped. "Did he tell them?" "He's still deciding." He shut off the water, reached for a towel. "But his kneecaps will help him remember the cost of that decision." I should have been horrified. Should have seen this for what it was, brutal, calculated violence. Instead, I felt only that terrible relief. He'd kept his promise. He hadn't killed. "Thank you," I whispered. Dante finally looked at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Not anger or coldness, but something more dangerous. Exhaustion stripped bare, showing the man beneath the monster. "Don't thank me for being less terrible than your father." His jaw worked. "That's not a high bar. It's higher than you think." We stood there in the dim kitchen, the takeout cooling between us, something unspoken pulling tight like a wire. He still held the towel, blood staining the white fabric. I could see where his shirt had torn, a glimpse of skin and the edge of what looked like a scar. "You need to change," I said. "That shirt's ruined." "Later. We need to talk about Marco." But he didn't move, didn't break eye contact. I made contact. "He's agreed to meet, but on his terms. Sicily. 3 days from now. Private location, no weapons, just you and me." "That's a trap, probably." The ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "But it's the only way forward." "You'd walk into a trap for this? For revenge against my father?" "I'd walk into hell for this." The words came out rough, unguarded. "But not just for revenge, Elena. For you." The admission hung between us, raw and dangerous. My heart hammered against my ribs. "You don't know me," I managed. "I know you ran from power when most people would kill for it." He took a step closer. "I know you'd rather starve than benefit from your father's blood money. I know you signed that contract even though you were terrified, because you're done running." Another step. The space between us evaporated to nothing. "I know. You grabbed my arm this morning and asked me not to kill, and I listened." His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "I never listen. Dante, you asked why I'm doing this. Why? I'm protecting you." His hand lifted, and this time he didn't stop, fingers brushing my cheek with devastating gentleness. "This is why. Because you make me want to be the man you see when you look at me." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the warmth of his touch, the intensity in his dark eyes. This was dangerous, more dangerous than my father's. Men or blood-stained contracts or walking into traps in Sicily. This was the kind of danger that destroyed you from the inside out. "I don't know what I see," I admitted. "Then let me show you." His thumb traced my jawline, sending electricity down my spine. "Let me prove I'm not him, not your father, not another man who'll use you as currency. And if you fail, if you become exactly what you hate, then you press that panic button and you run." His other hand came up, cradling my face with both hands now, holding me like something precious and breakable. "And I'll make sure you have everything you need to disappear forever." The promise broke something in me. Not my resolve or my fear, but the wall I'd built between wanting and having, between hope and self-preservation. I rose on my toes and kissed him. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then his hands tightened on my face and he kissed me back with the desperation of a drowning man breaking surface. Nothing gentle, nothing careful, just heat and need and 5 years of loneliness crashing against his 3 years of grief. His mouth tasted like smoke and coffee and something darker. I gripped his torn shirt, pulled him closer, wanting to crawl inside this moment and live there where my father couldn't reach and the future couldn't threaten, and nothing existed except the pressure of his lips and the thundering of my heart. He pulled back first, breathing hard, forehead resting against mine. Elena, my name was a prayer, a curse, a warning. We can't, I know. I did know. This was complicated beyond measure, tangled in revenge and survival in 100 ways it could destroy us both, but his hands were still on my face, tender, despite the blood dried on his knuckles. And when he looked at me, I saw something that terrified me more than any of my father's threats. I saw hope. 3 days until Sicily, he said quietly. 3 days to prepare you for what's coming. Then we should eat. I forced myself to step back, to rebuild some distance before I drowned in this. The food's getting cold, he nodded, but his eyes followed me across the kitchen with an intensity that made my skin burn. We ate in silence, the kiss hanging between us like a promise neither of us dared to keep. Chapter 7. Betrayal in the Blood. The message came at dawn, 2 days before we were supposed to leave for Sicily. I heard Danny's phone buzz from downstairs, then his sharp intake of breath. By the time I threw on clothes and stumbled down to the kitchen, he was already dressed, gun holstered at his hip, face carved from stone. What happened? I asked. He turned his laptop toward me without speaking. The screen showed a news article, barely an hour old. The headline made my blood turn to ice. Marco Salvi found dead in Sicilian villa. Suspected suicide. No, the word came out, strangled. No, that's not. He was going to meet us. He agreed. He's been dead for at least 12 hours. Danny's voice was flat, controlled, but I could see the rage simmering beneath. Which means someone knew about our meeting. Someone talked. The kitchen tilted. I gripped the counter, forcing myself to breathe. Your people? Screamed personally. Loyal for years. His jaw tightened. But someone knew, Elena. The timing's not coincidence. My mind raced through the possibilities, each one worse than the last. Then it hit me cold and sickening and obvious. The waiter, I whispered. The one from the hotel. The one you let live. Danny's expression went very still. I broke his kneecaps. He can barely walk, but he can talk. Nausea churned in my stomach. He knew I was Franco Moretti's daughter. He knew you were protecting me. If he sold that information to my father's men, they'd know we needed leverage. They'd know Marco was the key, and Franco would eliminate that leverage before we could use it. Dante slammed his fist on the counter, the sound cracking through the kitchen. God damn it. I should have killed him. I should have. I asked you not to. Guilt flooded through me, sharp as broken glass. This is my fault. Marco's death is on me. No, Dante moved fast, gripping my shoulders. This is on your father. On his paranoia and his brutality. You didn't pull any trigger, Elena, but you asked me to be better than him. His hands tightened. And maybe that was naive. Maybe that was dangerous. But you were right to ask. You were right to believe we could do this without becoming monsters. Marco's still dead. My voice cracked. And now we have nothing. No leverage. No proof. No way to make your father pay. Dante released me, pacing to the window. For a long moment, he just stood there, silhouette, dark against the gray dawnlight. When he spoke, his voice was soft and deadly. There's still one piece of leverage your father cares about. Understanding crashed over me like cold water. Me. If we make you visible, if we let him know exactly where you are, he turned back to me. He'll come. Not his men, not his soldiers. Him. Because you're the one thing Franco Moretti can't afford to lose. You want to use me as bait. The words I'd said days ago in the hotel dining room. Coming full circle. Draw him out into the open. I want to give you the choice. Dante crossed back to me. And I saw the conflict in his eyes, the war between revenge and something else. Something that looked dangerously like care. I can still put you on a plane. New identity, new continent. Enough money to start over. You walk away from this. From all of it. Including you? The question hung between us. Waited with the kiss. We hadn't talked about. The feelings neither of us had named, including me, he said quietly. I thought about Marco Salvi. Dead because my father's paranoia couldn't tolerate threats. About Danny's sister Isabella, who'd chosen death over marriage to a monster. About the waiter with shattered kneecaps. About all the small cruelties that rippled outward from my father's empire like poison in water. About 5 years of running. And how tired I was of being afraid. What's the plan? I asked. Something flickered in Danny's expression, relief or regret. I couldn't tell. We make noise. Let your father's network see you with me. Make it clear you're under my protection. He'll interpret it as an act of war, because in his mind, I'm his property. Exactly. Danny's voice went hard. And Franco Moretti doesn't let anyone take what belongs to him. He'll come for you himself, probably with minimal security, because his ego won't allow him to believe I'd actually hurt you. Would you? The question escaped before I could stop it. If it came down to it, if you had to choose between revenge and keeping me safe, he closed the distance between us in 2 strides, hands framing my face with that devastating gentleness. I would burn my entire empire to the ground before I let him touch you. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll try. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. And that if I fail, if something happens to me, there are instructions with my lawyer. Money, documents, everything you need to disappear. Tears stung my eyes. I don't want to disappear anymore. Then help me end this. He pressed his forehead to mine. And I felt him trembling, this man who controlled empires, who broke men without flinching, shaking with the weight of what he was asking. Help me make sure your father can never hurt anyone else. And then, when it's over, I whispered, we figure out what this is. His breath ghosted over my lips. This thing between us that feels like drowning and breathing at the same time. I kissed him then, fierce and desperate and terrified. He kissed me back like I was oxygen, like I was salvation, like I was the only thing standing between him and the abyss. When we pulled apart, his phone was buzzing again. He checked it, and his expression went cold. What? I asked. Security footage from the hotel. He turned the screen toward me. Your father's men just tortured the waiter to death. They're tying up loose ends. I stared at the grainy image, a young man's broken body, the casual brutality of my father's justice. When do we start? My voice came out steady, hard. Dante smiled, and it was sharp as a knife. Tonight, Chapter 8. Blood and Reckoning. The restaurant was one of my father's, an upscale Italian place in the financial district where politicians and criminals dined side by side, pretending civility while negotiating the city's dark underbelly. Dante and I walked through the front door at 8 o'clock, making no effort to hide. I wore a red dress. He'd had delivered designer. Expensive. The kind of thing Franco Moretti's daughter should wear. My hair was down, makeup perfect, every inch of me screaming visibility. Dante wore a suit that probably cost more than my entire year's salary as a waitress. His hand possessive on my lower back. We looked exactly like what we were. A declaration of war. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. I watched the color drain from his face, watched his hand tremble as he reached for his phone. Dante smiled, cold, dangerous, satisfied. Table for 2, Dante said pleasantly. Preferably somewhere visible. I were fully booked, make room. Danny's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. Or I'll buy this restaurant tonight and make room myself. We were seated within minutes, center of the dining room, every eye in the place trying not to stare while staring completely. I felt exposed, vulnerable, every survival instinct screaming at me to run. Danny's hand found mine under the table, anchoring me. Breathe, he murmured. You're doing perfectly. How long before he already knows? Dante nodded subtly toward the bar, where a man in a dark suit stood frozen, phone pressed to his ear. That's one of his lieutenants. Your father will get the call in under a minute. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was insane, suicidal. Everything I'd spent 5 years avoiding, condensed into one deliberate, catastrophic choice. The waiter brought wine. Neither of us had ordered, a deliberate message, positioning us as honored guests, or targets. Sometimes they were the same thing. Tell me something, I said, needing to focus on anything except the weight of watching eyes. When this is over, when my father's gone, what happens to you? Dante swirled his wine, contemplative. What do you mean? Your whole life is built on revenge, on destroying him. I leaned forward. What do you become when there's nothing left to fight? Something flickered across his face, uncertainty, maybe, or fear of a future he'd never let himself imagine. I don't know. That terrifies you, doesn't it? Peace. I've been at war since I was 27. His voice went quiet. I don't remember who I was before Isabella died. Before your father turned my grief into this weapon. Maybe that person's still there. I squeezed his hand. Maybe you could find him again. And if he's not, if I'm too broken, glass exploded. The front window shattered inward. And suddenly the world was chaos, screaming diners, overturned tables. Men in dark suits pouring through the entrance with guns drawn. Not shooting, not yet, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Dante moved with lethal efficiency, pulling me behind him, gun materializing in his hand. His men appeared from positions I hadn't noticed embedded among diners, stationed near exits, coordinated and prepared, but my father's men outnumbered them 3-1. Donde Caruso. The voice came from the doorway, cultured and cold. I knew it before I looked, knew it in my bones and blood and the deepest parts of my terror. Franco Moretti stepped through the shattered window. Impeccable in a charcoal suit, silver hair, perfectly styled, looking exactly like the monster I remembered. Older now, more weathered, but his eyes held the same brutal intelligence that had ruled my childhood with fear. He looked directly at me, and I felt 5 years old again, small and powerless and utterly his. "Hello, daughter?" His voice was almost gentle. "You've been difficult to find." I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Every word I'd prepared, every moment of false courage, evaporated under his gaze. "Let her go, Franco." Danny's voice cut through my paralysis. "This is between us." Between us? My father laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "You think you can take what's mine and call it business? My only child, corrupted by the man who what?" Dandy's gun stayed steady. "Who sees her as a person instead of property? Who asked her what she wanted instead of deciding for her?" Franco's expression darkened. "You know nothing about family, about loyalty, about what it costs to build an empire." "I know what it cost, Isabella." The name landed like a blade. "What it cost Marco Salvi's son. What it's cost every person you've broken to feed your ego." Bold words from a dead man. Franco nodded, and his soldiers raised their weapons. "I'll make this quick for you, Crusoe. But Elena comes home where she belongs." No, the word came from my mouth before I could think. I stepped out from behind Dante, legs shaking but voice clear. "I'm not going anywhere with you." My father's eyes narrowed. "You don't have a choice." I always had a choice. 5 years of fear crystallized into fury. You just never let me make it. You controlled everything, my life, my future, who I could talk to, who I could become. You were going to sell me to whoever offered the best alliance. I was going to protect you. You were going to cage me. My voice rose. "The way you caged Isabella Caruso. The way you kill anyone who threatens your control. Marco's son didn't deserve to die for wanting peace. Isabella didn't deserve to die for wanting freedom. And I don't deserve to live as your possession." Silence fell across the destroyed restaurant. Franco stared at me like I'd struck him, something almost human flickering behind the monster. "You sound like your mother," he said quietly. "Good." I lifted my chin. "She left you too, didn't she?" The official story was a car accident, but we both know the truth. She ran because you were killing her slowly. And you couldn't stand that. She'd rather die free than live in your prison. Franco's hand moved toward his jacket. And suddenly everyone was pointing guns at everyone else. Mexican standoff written in gunpowder and family blood. "Last chance, Elena," my father said. "Come home, or watch your lover die." I looked at Dante, at the man who'd offered me protection and choice and something that felt dangerously like love. Then I made my decision. Chapter 9. The price of freedom if you kill him, I said, voice steady despite the terror coursing through my veins. "You'll have to kill me too. Because I'll spend every breath I have left destroying everything you've built." My father's expression flickered surprise, maybe even respect. "You'd die for him? This man you've known for days?" "I'd die for the choice." I took another step forward, positioning myself directly between Dante and my father's gun. "Something you've never understood. It was never about him or you or any man. It was about being allowed to choose my own life." Elena. Danny's warning came low behind me. No, I didn't turn, keeping my eyes locked on Franco. "This has to end. One way or another. This ends tonight." My father studied me for a long moment, and I saw the calculation happening behind his eyes, weighing options, measuring costs, running scenarios like the chess master he'd always been. "You think you're brave," he said finally, "but you're still just a frightened girl playing at rebellion." Maybe. I forced myself not to flinch. "But I'm your frightened girl, aren't I? Your only heir. The last piece of family you have left after driving everyone else away with your brutality." Something cracked in his expression. "You know nothing about what I've sacrificed. I know you murdered Marco's son because he dared pursue peace." My voice cut through his. "I know you drove Isabella Caruso to suicide because you couldn't stand that she belonged to someone else first. I know you've spent 3 years searching for me, not because you love me, but because losing me made you look weak." "Careful, daughter. Why? What more can you take from me?" I spread my arms wide. "My freedom's already gone. My future's already destroyed. You've already stolen every choice I could have made. The only thing left is my life. And honestly, Papa, I'd rather die standing here than live one more day as your prisoner. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if I'd fly or fall. Then my father did something I'd never seen before. He lowered his gun. You really would do it, he said quietly. You'd let me kill you rather than come home. In a heartbeat, he looked past me to Dante, something unreadable passing across his face. She gets this from you, you know. Her mother. Same fire, same stubbornness. His jaw tightened. Same willingness to choose death over compromise. Then you should understand, Dante said, gun still trained on Franco, but voice carefully neutral, that you've already lost her. Killing me won't change that. Taking her by force won't change that. The daughter you're trying to protect died the day she walked out of your house. And what would you have me do? Franco's voice rose, anger bleeding through the control. Let her throw away her birthright for some fantasy of normal life? Let her waste herself on poverty and meaningless jobs when she could rule an empire? Let her choose, Dante said simply. Franco laughed bitter, exhausted. You say that like choice means anything in our world. Like we're not all prisoners of blood and history. We are. I turned slightly, so I could see both men. But we can choose what we do with those chains. You've chosen to make everyone else carry your weight. I'm choosing to break free, even if it kills me. My father looked at me, then really looked, maybe for the first time in my life. I saw him seeing not property, or legacy, or political capital, but a person. His daughter, grown and changed and irreversibly beyond his control. Your mother said something similar, he murmured, the night before she died. She said she'd rather burn her whole world down than live in the cage I'd built. Did you let her go? No, pain flickered across his face, gone almost instantly. And I've regretted it every day since. The admission hung in the air, fragile and devastating. So let me go now, I whispered. Don't make the same mistake twice. For a moment, I thought he might actually do it. Might lower his weapon, call off his men, walk away and let me live whatever life I could build from the ashes. Then his lieutenant's phone rang sharp, insistent, shattering the moment. Franco's eyes went cold as the man answered, listened, went pale. Boss, we have a problem. The feds just raided 3 of our warehouses. Someone tipped them off. They have everything. Financial records, shipping manifests, everything. Ice flooded my veins. Dante tends behind me. Franco's gaze snapped to Dante, understanding and fury blooming across his face. You, while I was distracted with this performance, I used the time you gave me, Dante said calmly. Every minute you spent hunting Elena, my people were gathering evidence. Every warehouse you left understaffed, every meeting you missed to chase ghosts, it all led here. You sacrificed her. Franco's voice went deadly soft. You used my own daughter as bait while you dismantled my organization. No, Dante stepped forward, drawing even with me. I gave her the choice, and she chose to help. Every piece of information about your operations, every code she remembered, every detail from her childhood, she gave it willingly. Your daughter destroyed you, Franco, not me. My father's face went white with rage. The gun rose again, but this time pointed at me. Traitor, he hissed. My own blood, your own blood that you tried to sell like cattle. My voice didn't shake. I'm done being your victim. I'm done carrying your sins. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Franco's men shifted nervously, looking toward exits. Boss, we need to move, the lieutenant urged. If the feds connect you to the warehouses, Franco kept the gun trained on me. And I saw the war happening behind his eyes, rage versus pragmatism. Revenge versus survival. This isn't over, he said finally, backing toward the door. You've made an enemy you can't imagine, daughter. Both of you. We already had one, I replied. Now we just don't have to pretend otherwise. He left, his men covering his retreat, and I felt my knees start to buckle. Dante caught me, holding me upright as the restaurant emptied and sirens screamed closer. It's done, he murmured against my hair. Elena, it's done. You're free. But freedom, I was learning, tasted like ashes and felt like falling. Chapter 10. What remains after war. 3 weeks later, I stood on the balcony of Danny's penthouse apartment, watching the city wake beneath a pale sunrise. The newspapers had called it the biggest organized crime bust into decades. Franco Moretti's empire had collapsed in 72 hours. Federal raids, seized assets, associates turning witness in exchange for deals. My father had fled the country, last spotted in Argentina with what remained of his loyalists. There was a warrant out for his arrest, extradition papers filed, but we both knew he'd never see trial. Men like Franco Moretti didn't die in courtrooms. They died in exile, paranoid and diminished, watching their legacies crumble to dust. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt hollow. "You're up early." Danny's voice came from the doorway, rough with sleep. He wore only pajama pants, hair disheveled, that scar on his jaw visible in the morning light. 3 weeks of sleeping in the same apartment had made us familiar with each other's rhythms, the nightmares that woke him at 3 a.m., the way I couldn't eat breakfast before coffee, the comfortable silence that had grown between us like something living. "Couldn't sleep," I said. He moved beside me, close, but not touching. We'd been careful about that since the restaurant. No more desperate kisses, no more confessions made at gunpoint, as if both of us were afraid that what we'd felt in the fire wouldn't survive in the aftermath. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. I watched the sun paint gold across glass towers. I destroyed my father, helped dismantle everything he built, but I also destroyed any chance of." I trailed off, unsure how to finish. "Family?" Dante supplied. "Forgiveness? Some fantasy reconciliation where he apologizes and you get the father you deserved? Something like that." My throat tightened. Stupid, right? After everything he did, everything he is, some part of me still hoped it's not stupid. His hand found mine on the railing, fingers threading through. "It's human. You're allowed to grieve, even monsters, Elena, especially when they're your blood." I looked down at our joined hands, at the contrast, his scarred knuckles against my smooth skin, his strength gentled to hold mine. "What about you? Did destroying him give you what you wanted?" He was quiet for a long moment. I thought it would feel like justice, like I'd finally avenged Isabella, given her death meaning. He turned to face me. "But she's still gone. Marco's still dead. All the people your father destroyed are still destroyed. The empire I built to fight him is still standing. And I still don't know who I am without the war. So we're both lost, maybe." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Or maybe we're both finally free to figure out what comes next." Behind us, his phone buzzed. He ignored it, but I felt him tense slightly, the instinct never quite gone, the readiness for violence that men like him carried like second skin. "You should get that," I said. "Could be important. Everything's important in this life." But he released my hand, moved to check. His expression shifted as he read. "It's my lawyer. Your father's attorney reached out. Franco wants to speak with you." My heart lurched. "Why?" "Doesn't say. Just requests a phone call, supervised, recorded." Dante looked up at me. "You don't have to. You don't owe him anything." But I was already reaching for the phone. Some magnetic pull I couldn't resist. Maybe closure. Maybe the confrontation we'd never truly had. Maybe just the desperate need to hear him say something, anything that made sense of the wreckage between us. Dante set up the call on speaker, his hand steady on my shoulder as my father's voice crackled through. "Elena, just my name," but waited with everything and said, "I'm here. I managed. I wanted." He paused, and I heard something I'd never heard before in Franco Moretti's voice. "Uncertainty. I wanted to tell you that your mother didn't die in an accident." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "She left me just like you said. Took sleeping pills in a hotel room across town. Left a note saying she couldn't be my prisoner anymore." His voice cracked. "I paid to make it look like a car accident, because I couldn't stand for people to know she'd rather die than stay." Tears burned my eyes. All those years, the lie I'd half suspected but never confirmed. "I made her miserable," Franco continued. "I made you miserable. I built an empire on suffering and called it love because I didn't know the difference." A long exhale. "You were right to run, right to destroy what I built. I see that now. Papa, I won't ask forgiveness. I don't deserve it." His voice strengthened. "But I want you to know that everything I did, the searching, the obsession, the violence, it was never about controlling you. It was about not losing you the way I lost her. About not having to admit I'd failed as a father the same way I failed as a husband." Silence stretched, filled with 25 years of damage that couldn't be undone. "I'm not coming back," I said finally. "I know." Something like pride colored his voice. "You're stronger than both of us. Stronger than me and your mother combined. You broke free, and you stayed free. That takes a kind of courage I never had. What will you do now? Disappear? Become nobody?" He laughed softly. "Maybe that's what I should have been all along." The line went dead. I stood there, phone still in my hand, feeling something shift inside me, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but release. The weight I'd carried for 5 years, the guilt and fear and desperate hope, finally letting go. Dante pulled me into his arms, and I let myself collapse against him, crying for the father I'd never had, and the one I'd destroyed, and the girl I'd been before I learned that love could look like chains. What now? I whispered against his chest. Now? He pulled back, tilting my face up to his. Now we figure out who we are when we're not running or fighting or surviving. We try. Try what? Everything. He kissed me, soft and careful and full of promise. We try everything, Elena, starting with this. And in that moment, standing in the ruins of our father's empires, with nothing left but each other and the future stretching uncertain before us, I finally understood what freedom felt like. It felt like falling. It felt like flying. It felt like choosing, every single day, to stay.